So Nergai Kai Bal Olarum, a theoretical YouTube channel where I have been very interested in the Mandalorian culture and history recently. You see, one of my favorite parts about fandom culture is the ability for fans to learn the languages of their favorite books, movies, or TV shows. A language that did not develop naturally and instead was made by someone is called a conlang. It's short for constructed language, and one of the most famous, as you're probably aware of, is Klingon from Star Trek. There's also Elvish from Lord of the Rings, Na'vi from Avatar, and both Dothraki and High Valyrian from Game of Thrones. But the thing is, I'm not that invested in any of those properties. I've never read a Song of Ice and Fire book, nor have I seen Game of Thrones. I don't care about Avatar, and while I do like Lord of the Rings, I've never been so into it to actually learn Elvish. And with the properties that I would learn a language from, their conlangs are far and few between. There's no way I'm finding one in either Disney or Pixar, that's just not their thing. And the closest thing to a conlang in Harry Potter is Parseltongue, but the problem with that is that it's not developed at all. The thing that makes Klingon and Elvish so great is that they have been so developed that you are able to say basically anything you want with already established vocabulary. I mean, Tolkien literally was a linguist, and then the story of Middle-earth came from the languages he created. But I like Star Wars, and surely there has to be a canon and developed language in there, right? Well, not really. Most of the languages in Star Wars are just nonsense. Sure, they all have their own unique sound, but in the end, they're just gibberish. But the one caveat I have is that there are no canon and developed languages. But that doesn't stop the fanbase and legends from making their own. One of my favorite cultures in all of Star Wars is the Mandalorians, and in the legend, specifically the video game Republic Commando, Jesse Harlan, the composer for the game, wrote a song in the Mandalorian language. Then Karen Traviss, the author of many official Star Wars books, expanded on that language by developing an entire lexicon and set of grammatical rules, and thus the language of Mando was born. But when Disney bought Star Wars, they uncanonized all of this. However, in an episode of Rebels, a show made by Disney, they said this.
Sukuya lit ran, Ibiki Sabine ran, Aranovar, Gadetje Mevar Tigar.
That is Mandoa, validating me in spending all this time trying to learn a completely fake language. Anyway, what was this video about again? Oh yeah, is Mando still a Mandalorian? If you haven't guessed it yet, today we are discussing the scene at the end of the first season of The Mandalorian, in which the titular character Din Djarin, or as most Mandalorians are commonly called, Mando, is shot in the back of the head and must have his helmet removed to treat it. So what's the big deal? Just take off the helmet, spray some Bacta fluid on there, and move on with it. But the problem is, during the entire show, Mando has been telling us that according to the Mandalorian creed, he may never remove his helmet in front of another living being. The way the show deals with this is by saying that IG-11 is a droid and therefore not a living being, so it is okay that Mando has his helmet removed by him. But I have some problems with this. Mainly, this just seems like such a simple way to solve the problem. Surely somebody has thought of this before, right? Droids are such a common thing in the Star Wars universe that they have to have revised the rule already to either include or not include droids. But even if they have revised the rule, what are they revising it from? What was the original rule regarding helmets, and what is it now? Well, the show doesn't give us very much information on that front aside from the 2 times Mando explains the system. First, when Cara asks him what will happen if he takes off his helmet in front of another person, he tells her that if he takes the helmet off, he will never be allowed to put it back on again. And second, when IG-11 tries to take his helmet off, he tells him that
it is forbidden.
Wow. Real nice explanation. That really cleared things up for us. But then he says that no living thing has seen him without his helmet since he swore the creed. To which IG responds that he is not a living thing. He takes the helmet off, Bacta is sprayed, and we get some top-notch Taika Waititi comedy.
You have suffered damage to your central processing unit.
You mean my brain?
So what can we gather from these two explanations? Well, we know that at least he believes that if he takes his helmet off, then he will no longer be a Mandalorian. We know this because of his distaste for people who are not Mandalorians wearing Mandalorian armor. So if he removes his, then he will no longer be a Mandalorian and thus never be allowed to put it back on again. Of course, he could still technically put it back on, but then he would have to live the rest of his life knowing that he is not truly a Mandalorian, and if any other Mandalorian finds out, they will likely react in the same manner that he did with Cobb Vanth. But that's pretty much all we know, since Mando is the first character we've ever seen to actually follow this rule. There's not much else we can gather from the canon sources. And you know what that means. Oh no, non-canon sources, the entire video is invalid, what are we gonna do? No. Hold on, it's fine. Just like Mandoa, the Mandalorian language, was uncanonized but brought back in Rebels, a lot of the other aspects of Mandalorian culture will probably end up leaking into the canon once more. Besides, the rest of this video would just be complete speculation if we stuck to the shows. As said previously, Karen Travis expanded the Mandalorian language through her books, but she also heavily expanded the Mandalorian culture. In fact, she practically made the entire thing. Before she touched it, we knew that the Mandalorians existed, but we knew nothing else about them. Now we know every facet of their entire culture, and one of the most important parts of that culture is the Code of Honor. The Mandalorian Code of Honor is a collection of 3 codes that the Mandalorians should live by. The Canons of Honor, the Razal Nar, and the Super Commando Codex. The Canons of Honor are a set of beliefs relating different aspects of Mandalorian culture to life. They are: strength is life, for the strong have the right to rule; honor is life, for without honor one may as well be dead; loyalty is life, for without one's clan one has no purpose; and death is life, for one should die as they have lived. Mando shows all of these traits throughout the series. He showed strength when he took out the Mudhorn, he showed both honor and death when he told IG to kill him because he would rather be killed by him than an imp, and he showed loyalty constantly throughout his life as he gives every bit of Beskar he earns through bounty hunting back to the armorer. It is also this loyalty that keeps him following this code even if he knows he could get away with it. The Razal Nar are similar. They are the 6 core tenets of living the life of a Mandalorian. It is said that these are the Razal Nar, the 6 actions sacred to our movement. Do them and you may live to call yourselves Mandalorians. So while someone may still be a Mandalorian, even if they don't follow every aspect of the Canons of Honor with every waking moment of their life, if they wish to be a Mandalorian, they must simply complete these 6 actions whenever they are called to do so. And these actions are speaking the language, defending yourself and your family, raising your children as Mandalorians, contributing to your clan's welfare, and rallying to the Mandalore, the leader of the Mandalorians' cause, when called to do so. But the very first tenet, and thus the one above all else, is to wear your armor. In Rebels, Sabine says that her armor is 500 years old, and it carries with it the battles and blood that makes a Mandalorian who they are. So to disregard one's armor is to disregard thousands of years of history. The final piece of the Code of Honor is the Super Commando Codex, but to understand this, we need to understand a bit of the history of the Mandalorian people. For thousands of years, the Mandalorians were a group of warrior clans who would spread from planet to planet, conquering all of them, until they ran into the Jedi. The Jedi proved more difficult to defeat as they wielded the Force in combat, but the Mandalorians were resourceful. All of the cool weapons that they actually use today were designed specifically to best a Jedi. Eventually, the Mandalorian and Jedi War ended when a Force-sensitive Mandalorian named Tar Vizsla was inducted into the Jedi Order, while at the same time becoming the Mandalore. This is also the origin of the Darksaber, as Tar Vizsla combined both Mandalorian and Jedi technology to create it, and he used it in the place of a normal lightsaber. When Vizsla died, the Jedi took the Darksaber, but Clan Vizsla saw it as theirs, so they broke into the Jedi archives and stole it, causing another 1,000-year-long war. But this time, the Mandalorians didn't do so great. The last battle left the home world of Mandalore scorched and only inhabitable in biodomes. After this fight, the Mandalorians never returned to their former galaxy-conquering ways. In fact, after a civil war, the new Mandalorians, a pacifist society of people, became the primary government on Mandalore, and during the Clone Wars, they led the Council of Neutral Systems. This is a complete 180 from their old days of being warriors. Now this is where the Super Commando Codex comes in. Now there were two main factions of Mandalorians. The new Mandalorians, who wanted to restart as a pacifist society, and Death Watch, who wanted to return to their powerful warrior past. Then there was this Mandalorian named Jaster Muriel, who would eventually go on to become the Mandalore. He believed that the Mandalorians could still be warriors, but they had to go back to their days of honor instead of the ruthless and savage ways that many Mandalorians had resorted to at the time. Muriel thus created the Super Commando Codex, a book of ways to live your life with honor both on and off the battlefield. I like to think of this as sort of a combination of the Old Farmer's Almanac and the Art of War. This book was put into the Codes of Honor during Muriel's rule as the Mandalore about 60 years before the Battle of Yavin, and has since been in place for those wishing to call themselves Mandalorians. We don't actually have a copy of this book since it contains like 600 rules, all based on both the Canons of Honor and the Razel Nar. So it is entirely possible that one of these rules says never to remove one's helmet in front of another. Okay, so now we know the context of why Mando refuses to remove his helmet in front of anyone else. It is most likely a rule written less than 50 years before Mando even put it on for the first time. And the rule is made to maintain one's honor as opposed to serving a purely practical purpose. If you reveal your face in front of someone else, then you are presenting yourself as an individual as opposed to a Mandalorian. When you keep the helmet on, you allow the entire history of the Mandalorians to live on through you, but if you take it off, that is considered selfish. But this still leaves two big problems. Why is this rule so easy to find a loophole through? And something you've probably been screaming at your screen the entire video, why does no one else seem to follow this rule? Just 10 years prior to The Mandalorian, Bo-Katan became the Mandalore, doing this. If breaking this rule makes someone no longer a Mandalorian, then there's a big political issue going on here. In fact, both Sabine and Bo-Katan are most likely going to be in this season of The Mandalorian, so what gives? Well, both of these issues can be solved if you understand one key thing about Star Wars in general. Space is big. Like, really big. And one of the key traits of Mandalorian society is the clan-based system. Young Din Djarin was rescued from battle droids as a child around 19 BBY by Death Watch, the group of Mandalorians who wanted to return to being warriors. You can tell this by their blue outfits and the emblem on their shoulder. But they were actually being led by Maul at this time and were most likely preoccupied with preparing for the siege of Mandalore, which would take place later that year. So in order to follow the Razel Nar and raise this child as a Mandalorian, they delivered him to the clan led by the Armorer on Navarro, who we can also tell is Death Watch by the Maul-like horns on her helmet, a common trend in Death Watch members during Maul's rule as Mandalore. It just so happened this specific clan was more extreme in its following of the Super Commando Codex. This clan also spent most of their time hiding underground and didn't have much contact with droids, so it is actually fairly likely that Mando was the first to realize this oversight in the rules. But did this loophole work? Should Mando still be a Mandalorian? For that, we need to look at the various droid rights movements from across the series. Haha, I bet you thought this video was almost over. Well, don't worry, it actually almost is. There are two main droid liberation movements that we see in the series. First, there is whatever L337 is in, and their main goal seems to be giving droids the same rights as living organisms, like how L3 frees the droids on Kessel from their slavery. The other droid liberation movement is one that you probably haven't heard of before, but for some reason was made reference to in the first episode of The Mandalorian Season 2. When Mando is trying to get the information from Gor Koresh, he says,
I swear it by the Gatra.
The droid Gatra is an elite group of battle droids that resented the Empire for switching to organic stormtroopers and casting them out. They worked with other crime groups to try to achieve their eventual goal of droid rights. In fact, they were so feared among criminals in the time after the Empire that simply invoking their name was enough to convince others of your legitimacy. This is why Koresh swore by the Gatra when Mando didn't believe him about Tatooine. It is sort of like swearing on the river Styx. If you do so insincerely, then the gods will strike you down. From these two movements, we see that droids are not yet considered to be equal to organics, but many believe that they should be. This means that legally, Mando should still be a Mandalorian. Case closed. However, spiritually, it will come down to how Mando specifically feels about droids, which actually changed the moment he let IG take his helmet off. So is Mando still a Mandalorian? I don't know, and I'm not even sure if he does. But I don't think it's a coincidence that he neglected to tell the armorer when she gave him his Mudhorn signet. You know what no one really pays attention to? Technically, the leader of the Death Watch, and really all of the warrior Mandalorians, is a title passed on by killing the previous leader. So when Maul killed Pre Vizsla, he became the new leader. But when Sabine steals the Darksaber from him and gives it to Bo-Katan, she becomes the leader. But technically, she didn't kill Maul. Obi-Wan did. Which makes Obi-Wan Kenobi the second Jedi to become Mandalore. But after you take one step further, he sacrificed himself to Darth Vader in A New Hope. Then Darth Vader died when Luke turned him back into Anakin in Return of the Jedi. Which means that technically, during the time of The Mandalorian, Luke Skywalker is the rightful king of Mandalore. But something tells me they're not gonna follow that line of reasoning in the show. Anyway, if you liked this video, then do that. If you want more, like it, subscribe, and while you're down there, why don't you leave a comment about whether you think Mando should technically still be a Mandalorian. We've got a Twitter. Follow it at @theory_central, because that is the way. But that's it for this video, so thanks for watching, and we'll see you later.
That was a joke. It is meant to put you at ease.